Okay. And we are recording. Okay, good morning, everyone. It's good to see you. Good to have everyone here. Today is Wednesday. It is the 1st of July, July 1st. And we're getting ready for a double Parsha here in Chukas-Balak. It's going to be, oops, what happened to the share screen? We lost the share screen. One second. Let's get that share screen. Oh, I'm sorry. A little mishap here. Okay, does everyone, you're muted, but you can give me a thumbs up. Everyone sees the screen? Everyone sees it? The sources? Okay, good.
Yes.
All right, good. Here we go. All right, so we're getting ready for a double Parsha this week. It's both Chukas and Balak. In Israel, it's just Balak because, again, we got off sync with Israel at Shavuos because by us in Chukas-Balak, the second day of Shavuos was a Shabbos, so we did not lane the Parshas HaShavua, but in Israel they did. So Israel was a week ahead of us till this Shabbos. This Shabbos, we're going to lane two Parshios here in America in Chukas-Balak. It's going to be both Chukas and Balak. In Israel, they're just going to lane Balak. And after the Shabbos, we'll be all caught up. So I wanted to share with you some good sources that I found that had never really caught my eye before. I found some good sources on Chukas. So let's look at this. So Chukas, I always found to be a fascinating parsha because there's a big time jump that takes place right at the beginning of Chukas. And let's see. So the pasuk says, this is in Perek Chaf, so it's chapter 20. The pasuk says, Aleph, Vayivohu b'nei Yisrael kol ha'edah midbar Tzin. All of the Jewish people, the entire congregation, enters the wilderness of Tzin, b'chodesh harishon, in the first month, that means Nisan. Vayeshev ha'am b'Kadesh, and they all settle down in the part of the wilderness that's called Kadesh. And then, tragically, Vatamas Sham Miriam HaNeviah, that special big sister of Moshe, she passes away. Vatikaver Sham, and that's where she was buried. V'lo haya mayim la'edah, at that point, nobody had water. Vayikalu al Moshe ve'al Aaron, people start to gather against Moshe and Aaron. So Rashi quotes a medrash that tells us all those 40 years that Bnei Yisrael were in the wilderness, the Be'er, that wellspring of water that followed them the whole time, was in the Zechus, it was in the merit of Miriam. Now that Miriam had passed away, that Be'er was almost like a rolling rock that provided the water. It stopped flowing and it got lost amongst other rocks, and that's when everyone starts to panic, and that's where the incident occurs this week of Moshe hitting the rock. And the Chazal point out, it was only then that Miriam died that the wellspring dried up. That only then did they realize that this incredible bracha, this incredible blessing that they had for those 38 years in the wilderness was all a result of Miriam HaNeviah. They never had a chance to say thank you because they didn't even realize it was in her zechus, it was in her merit until she died. So that's that. Let's take a look at Rashi. Rashi is on Pasuk Aleph. Rashi says, it says Kol ha'edah, that he's going on Kol ha'edah, on the entire congregation. The entire congregation comes into the wilderness. So what does that mean? So Rashi quotes the Medrash. It says, Eidah Shlema, it was a complete congregation. Shekvar Mesu Misei Midbar, all of the generation that was destined, that was decreed on them to die in the wilderness, meaning after the sin of the spies in Parshas Shalach, all of the adult males over the age of 20 were destined to die. So we are now 38 years later. There's this massive jump that takes place in Parshas Chukas. That the Parsha begins, we're in the second year of the wilderness, the second year since they left exile, since the Exodus, since they left Egypt. And all of a sudden, in this pasuk, in Perek Chaf, we all of a sudden basically fast forward 38 years. And that always fascinated me, is that what happened during those 38 years and why don't we hear about it? And I found a source that's going to discuss that. But that's what I'm first bringing in from this Rashi. Rashi points out here, Kol ha'edah, why does he's quoting the Medrash, why does it emphasize the entire congregation? To tell us this was Eidah Shlema. This was the best of the congregation because that whole generation that was supposed to die in the wilderness has already passed. And at this point, they now have everybody else. So 38 years, that's how we've got this indication. 38 years have fast forwarded, and we don't know anything what happened during that period of time because Miriam died at the end of the travail in the wilderness, because that's when Moshe hits the rock. So this is this massive jump in time takes place in Parshas Chukas. Let's see a little bit later in the chapter, and you'll see Rashi quotes the Medrash telling this teaching again, is that this is the same parak, same chapter, 20, Chaf. So at the beginning of the parak, Miriam Hanaviyah dies. Towards the end of the parak, Chaf Beis, we're going to see tragically Aaron passes away. So Chaf Beis says, Vayisume Kadesh, they left Kadesh, that was where Miriam died. Vayevo b'nei Yisrael kol ha'eda, again that term, kol ha'eda. The entire congregation comes to Har Hahar, Mount Har, or it can mean the mountain on top of a mountain. That was the way this mountain looked like. There was one big wide mountain, and there was a narrow mountain on top of it. Vayomer Hashem o Moshe v'el Aaron b'Hor Hahar. Hashem speaks to Moshe and Aaron at Hor Hahar, al gvul Eretz Edom lemor, which was right by the border of Edom. And this is what God says: Chav Dalet ye'asef Aaron el Amav. It's time for Aaron to pass away and return to his people, meaning that's a euphemism for to pass on. Aaron is not going into the land of Israel, and this is all because of what happened earlier, that after the sin, of hitting the rock, Aaron had some part in that. It says, because of that incident of hitting the rock that occurred after Miriam died, it was decreed on Moshe and Aaron that they were not going to go into the land of Israel. So let's see Rashi here, Kol Ha'edah. Again, the same expression. We saw it when they went into Midbar Kadesh. So again, it said Kol Ha'edah, the whole Edah, and Rashi quoted the Medrash that meant the best of them, because the generation that was supposed to die all died. So here again, Chav Beis, Rashi, Kol Ha'edah, Kulam shleimim v'omdim lichanes la'aretz. At this point, everybody is perfect. That's what it means, Kol Ha'edah. This was the cream of the crop. Everyone was perfect, ready to enter into the land of Israel. There was no one remaining from the crew that had the decree on them to die in the wilderness. At this point, we're in the last year of the wandering in the wilderness. All of that generation of adult males has already died. The Elu, and anyone who's left now at the time that Aaron dies, Velu me'osan shekasuv behen. This is of the same crowd that we're going to read about a little bit later in Devarim, Chaim kulchem hayom, that on this day all of you are alive. Meaning, we now see this is the generation of that is still alive, because all of the people guilty after the sin of the spies have died, and they've passed on. So 2 times in this parak, the term is used, Kol Ha'edah, and Rashi brings down the Medrash on both of them to say this is what it's getting at. So I'm going to scroll to the next page, which again indicates there was this 38-year jump. We'll see a source about that soon. I just always found that fascinating.
Rabbi?
Yes, ma'am.
Just a real quick. So did Aaron and Miriam die in one right after the other in the same year?
Yeah, they're in the 38th year. That's the final year in the wilderness. It's the same chapter there. It's the next journey. In other words, Midbar Kadesh is where Miriam died, and Aaron dies at the next stop, which was Har Hahar. I don't know. We're going to see it was about 5 months later, because Miriam dies, it says it was Chodesh Harishon, that was Nisan, and Aaron dies in Av. The Torah tells us he died in Av, so it's about 5 months later. Okay, so let's see the Ramban on this pasuk. We're not going to do the whole Ramban, just the beginning of it, because the Ramban's going to raise a question. The Ramban raises a question here. He says, "Vayevo b'nei Yisrael kol ha'edah midbar tzin." That was what we saw, that kol ha'edah, that the whole chevra came to midbar tzin. That was where Miriam died. So it says, ha'edah, he quotes Rashi, Edah Shlema. Again, this means it was a complete meaning. It was a very wholesome congregation. Shekvar Mesu Misei Midbar. Everyone who was supposed to die in the wilderness has already died. Ve'elu Parshu L'chaim. Anyone who's left alive were the ones who were destined to live and go into the land of Israel. Lashon Rashi. That's what Rashi quotes from this Medrash. V'chein Das Rabbi Avram. Also the Eben Ezra, another one of our great commentators to the Chumash, he says the same thing on that pasuk. So the Ramban asks a very logical question. He says, if that's the story, Im Kain Matzorach Lahazkir Kain Bevoam Achrechein Al Harahar. If that's the story, then why did he have to repeat it twice? In other words, we already know that in Pasuk Aleph, that Kol Ha'edah, the entire congregation, meaning everybody who was wholesome is still alive, but anybody who died in the wilderness has already died. Then why did it have to repeat that in Pasuk Chav Beis when it's talking about going to Har Hahar? It says it again, it's Kol Ha'edah. What do you mean? You already told me 20 verses earlier. You already told me that anybody who needed to die in the wilderness has already died, and anybody who's left are the ones who death was not decreed upon them in the wilderness. So everything is fine. So why? That's the Ramban's question. Why did it have to be repeated a second time? The same limud. You already told me this once. Why a second time? And the Ramban has a suggestion that he wants to play out, but that's for a different time. I want to share with you an answer to this question that I saw in Rabbi Zalman Sorotzkin in Aznaim LaTorah, because I love looking at Rabbi Sorotzkin, and I saw that he addresses this without mentioning the Ramban. He brings down the question, and you'll see this is what he's dealing with. So look what he says here. Vayavo b'nei Yisrael kol ha'edah. He's going on Pasuk Aleph, that before Miriam dies, we're told that the entire congregation enters the wilderness. Ha'edah shleima, it's in a complete congregation. It's a good, wholesome bunch. Shekvar mesu meseh midbar. Everyone who was supposed to die in the wilderness has died. Ve'elu parshul chaim. And anyone here who's around has been designated for life, that they're going to go into the land of Israel. So he says Rashi. That's how Rashi learns it. He goes, Miriam Mesa b'chodesh harishon. So Miriam died in the first month, meaning Nisan. V'maz kfar mesu meseh midbar. So meaning if by Nisan, in this last year in the wilderness, this is year 40. In the wilderness, 38 years have gone by, because the last account, Parshas Shlach, is in the second year, and Korach is in the second year. So 38 years have gone by. We're now in year 40 in the month of Av, in the month of Nisan rather. Miriam dies the month of Nisan. So it says, "Az kfar mesu meseh midbar v'nishara eida shlema." So in Pasuk Aleph, we're told that all of the people who were supposed to die in the wilderness have died, and you're left now with this wholesome congregation. If that's the case, lama nemar b'misas Aaron b'chodesh chamishi. Why then, when Aaron dies in the 5th month in Av, why does it say odapam? Why does it repeat again? Vayavo b'nei Yisrael kol ha'edah harahar. That kol ha'edah came to harahar. The Gam Sham Perish Rashi, and there too Rashi explains Odapam Shekfar Kolum Meseh Midbar. So Rashi does it a second time. It's 5 months later. You already told me 5 months earlier that anyone who was designated to die in the wilderness died. Why 5 months later do you give me that same piece of information? Of course they're dead. They died 5 months ago. So that was the question the Ramban asked. So he's essentially raising that point again. Look what he answers now. Yesh Lamar, here's his answer. Shekol ha'edah ha'murkan v'sham. Why does it say it twice? Kol ha'edah twice, meaning in Pasuk Aleph and then again in Chaf Beis. V'alig zera shava mikol ha'edah ha'mor b'meraglim. It's meant to teach us something, comparing to the text where it used the expression of kol ha'edah by the sin of the spies. It talked about Eidah, that congregation. That's the term that was used about the 10 guilty spies that died after their failed mission. It says, Im lo zos esel l'chol ha'edah hara hazos b'midbar hazeh yitamu. It said over there that this whole generation is supposed to die in the wilderness. Well, that's the term that was used. Ulefichach hizker kan. Therefore, it specifically used the wording here, kol ha'edah ha'hitama. That whole generation, meaning that whole generation that I mentioned back in Shlach, they've all passed on. Viata, and now, Ba'eda Chadasha, there's a new congregation. They've been replaced by new people. She'osa heftiach Hashem laviart. This is the generation that Hashem promised He would bring into the land of Israel. The Remez Hashem Zos, and God hints to this, b'misas Miriam, when Miriam died. The Gam b'misas Aaron, and also when Aaron died, Lomar. In other words, why does He use the term Kol Eidah by both by Miriam and by Aaron? To tell us, Sheshnei Eila, these two people, meaning these tzaddikim, Miriam, great tzaddikas Miriam, and that tzaddik Aaron, these two people, Shnei Eila lo mesu mipnei gzeras hamaraglim. Yes, they died in the wilderness, but they did not die as a result of the sin of the spies. They were not included in that chevra. Rak mipnei she'egia zmanam lipater min olam. They simply died because it was their time to exit the stage. But that gezerah, the decree that was on all the adult men of Bnei Yisrael, that was the euphemism used for that, was kol ha'edah kvar batla. That has already been taken care of. So in other words, what Aznaim Torah is mentioning is, you know why the Torah says kol ha'edah twice? To tell us, both by the death of Miriam and by the death of Aaron, yes, they're exiting the stage now and they're dying, but don't ever make the mistake of thinking that they died now because of the sin of the spies. They were not part of that chevra. That was limited to the adult males at the time of the sin of the spies who gave up hope on going into the land of Israel. Miriam clearly wasn't part of that because she wasn't male, and Aaron wasn't part of that because he didn't give up. He didn't fall into that trap that the rest of Bnei Israel did. So that's the way Rabbi Sorotzkin wants to address this, that the Torah emphasized this twice, and Rashi spells it out twice, to basically sing the praises of Miriam and Aaron. Don't ever make the mistake of thinking just because they're passing away now that their deaths had anything to do with the sin of the spies and that whole chevra that died as a result of that. That's how Rav Sorotzkin deals with that. I thought that was a very interesting approach. I want to share with you, we saw something from him last week. Reb Simcha Zissel Broida. Reb Simcha Zissel he passed away in 2000. He served for 40 years as one of the Roshei Yeshiva, one of the heads of the yeshiva called Knesset Yisrael, the Chevron Yeshiva. Again, this was the yeshiva that started off in Slobodka in Lithuania in the early 20s. I forgot the exact year. They started a branch in Hebron in Israel, and that's where, again, we mentioned last week, Memphis' own Dave Shainberg, Zichrono Livracha, went to go study there. Tragically, he was murdered in the 1929 riots. This Rabbi, Simcha Zissel Broida, learned in the yeshiva at the same time. He was away that weekend when the pogrom took place, and he stayed in the yeshiva, continued learning, and eventually joined its administration, was one of the heads of the yeshiva. He was very fond of the Ramban, and I have a set of his Sfarim that we treated ourselves to last year. It's called Sam Derech. And Sam Derech, are a lot of the thoughts that Rav Simcha Zissel had and the Ramban that he would say over and give shiurim on in the Hebron Yeshiva. So I was looking to see if he picked up on anything here, and I was so happy when I saw him, because he picked up on a question that had bothered me for years, and I alluded to it earlier, is that the episodes at the beginning of the wilderness, the sojourn in the wilderness, whether it's the sin of the spies, the Korach rebellion, that all occurred in the second year since the exodus from Egypt. And then in Parshas Chukas, we're told they're in the final year. So you jump from year 2 to year 40. There's 38 missing years that we know nothing of. There's nothing that we have of those 38 years. And it always puzzled me that what happened? Why is there no record of those 38 years? And I was so happy this week when I saw that Rav Simcha Zissel, that he wants to address this. So let me share this with you. He has such a beautiful insight. It's in the Hebrew. We'll read it together. We'll translate. Yesh lisponein, it's appropriate to ponder, b'davar muflamod, about an amazing detail. Haparshios arabos bahen misupar b'Torah odos dora midbar. There are many incidences that the Torah tells us about the generation of the wilderness, misiachsos l'kshnasayim, that are really all packed into the first 2 years that they're in the wilderness. Mitoch arba'im hashanim shoyba midbar, the first 2 of the 40 years, that's where the primary information we have of the history of Bnei Israel in the wilderness. Hashana Rishona, the first year when they left Egypt, Utchilas Hashana Shniya, in the beginning of the second year, that's when the incident with the spies, and that's when the Korach rebellion, Balashana Achrona, and on the final year, year 40. That's really all we have. We have the first year, the beginning of the second year, and then we have the 40th year. But there's that 38 years in the middle that's missing. So he says here, B'Meseches Avos, if you look in the tractate of Pirkei Avos, in Perek Hey, it's Mishnah Daled, Tznan, we learn in the Mishnah, Asara Nisyonos Nasu Avoseno Es Hamakom Baruchu B'Midbar. There were 10 challenges that our ancestors put up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu during their time in the wilderness. There were 10 ways that they challenged them. Shenemar, Vayinasu Osi Ze Eser Pamim V'Lo Shama B'Koli. Is that Hashem says to Moshe, is that these people, they're such a troublesome people. They've quarreled with me 10 times. The Gemara tells us, what were the 10 times? What were the 10 times that Bnei Israel messed with Hashem in the Midbar? He says, the Gemara, it's an Erechin, Partu Asara Sadisyonos. The Gemara spells out, what were these 10 times that we challenged God? Shnayim Bayam, there were 2 times at the Yam Suf. He'll spell those out in a minute. Shnayim Baman, there were 2 times we challenged God relating to the Mun. Shnayim Bislav, there were 2 times we challenged God with quail. Shnayim B'mayim, there were 2 times we challenged God that we didn't have water. The Echad Be'egel, there was 1 time we challenged God about the sin of the golden calf. The Echad Be'midbar Paran, and there was the sin in Midbar Paran, that was with the sin of the spies. Those are the 10. The Gemara spells out Shnayim Bayam. What does it mean that we challenged God 2 times by the sea? Achas biyarida, 1, when we first were going down into the water. D'chsiv, it says there, Hamibli en kvarim b'Mitzrayim, were there not enough graves in Egypt that you brought us here? That was the first time. Achas ba'aliyah, there was a second time we challenged God dealing with the sea when we left the sea. The Siv, it says in Tehillim, Vaymaru al yam b'yamsuf, and we complained bitterly about during that time of the Yamsuf, Malamed Yisrael mimarim v'osa shavi amru kishem shanu olim mitzad zeh came hamitzrim olim mitzad acher. That we doubted Hashem. There was a number of members of Bnei Israel that said the same way we're exiting, that Egyptian army still exists. They must have exited somewhere else, and they're going to continue to pursue us and make our lives miserable. So they doubted Hashem. That was sin number 2. Shnayim b'mayim, what does it mean that we challenged God twice when it came to lack of water? First was b'mara. That was when we got to a place called Mara, where the water was bitter. D'chsiv, it says there, vayvo marasa. D'chsiv vayilana amal Moshe. It says that we complained against Moshe. B'refidim, that was the second place of Refidim. It says vayachnu b'refidim v'mayim l'shtos ha'am vayirav Moshe. That was the second time that we challenged Moshe about water. Shnayim b'ma'an, there were 2 times we challenged Moshe when it came to man. D'chsiv al tetzu, that he said to him, nobody go out. It was Shabbos. Nobody should go out to try to collect. V'yetzu. And there was people who still went out to check it out to see. Val tosiru. He also said, don't leave anything over. V'yosiru. And there was a chevra that tried to leave it over just to see what would happen, and it turns to worms. Shnayim b'slav. There were 2 times we challenged Moshe and God when it came to the quail. Rishon b'shivtenu al sira basar. The first time was when we complained, saying, oh, we remember those flesh pots back in Egypt. We had all the meat and everything that we wanted. Sheni, when was the second one? Vasafsuf asher bekirbo. There was a time that it says in Bamidbar that the asafsuf, that the gathered masses were complaining about the mud. They didn't like it anymore. That was number 2. The Egel, when did we challenge God with a golden calf? Kedisa, everyone knows that one. This in Shmos, where the golden calf takes place. The Midbar Paran, what happened in Midbar Paran? Kedisa, that was the sin of the spies. Okay, those are the 10 times brought down in Mishnayos and in Gemara Erchen that we challenged God in the wilderness and we gave him a run for his money. So Rav Simcha Zissel points out, next paragraph, if you look at all of those challenges, they were in year number 1, and the beginning of year number 2. And then you also have Cheder Meraglim. And when did Cheder Meraglim take place? If you perish Rashi, B'tchilas Parshas Maseh, that's where that took place, was in year number 2, was the Cheder Meraglim, the sin of the spies. You have Parshas Machlokas Korach. When did the sin of Korach take place? It was right around the same time. We saw that they were linked together. It was right after the sin of the spies that they got demoralized, and that's when the Korach rebellion begins. Like the Ramban says, and we saw that earlier. When did the sin of Korach occur? I think we saw this last week. Was immediately after the sin of the spies. Asher Maisa Meraglim was the sin of the spies. And then the events that we read about in Parshas Chukas. The Miriam dies and she's buried. And because of a lack of water, they attack Moshe and Aaron. And also we're going to read in this parsha the whole sin of the what happened. How did Moshe and Aaron respond? That they hit the rock and said, speaking to it. That's in the final year in the wilderness, so it's year 40. We don't find, in other words, if you look at all the times we challenged God in year number 1, in year number 2, and in year number 40. What happened in that whole interval in between? What happened with everything else? We don't find that we were making trouble. We don't know anything what happened in those years. So next paragraph, the Apela Hagadol. The amazing thing is, Madua ha'elima Torah es kol mahalech 40 shnos lechtam shel b'nei Yisrael b'midbar. Why did the Torah leave it blank? What happened to us in those missing 37 or 38 years in the wilderness? Mavad mashira b'shanim sefuros, except for what occurred to us in a couple of years, in year 1, part of year 2, and in year 40. Other than that, we know nothing. He says, what do we make of this? I was always bothered by this question. And look what Rav Simcha Zissel does with it. Ukefia nira, here's what it appears to me. That's the reason. You know why the Torah didn't record anything, what happened in those 38 or 37 years? The only times we made trouble, the only times we made a tumult in the Midbar was in year 1, part of 2, and part of 40. But the other years, Nagu biyosher. We were biyosher. We did exactly what we were supposed to do. Uvidvekus v'Hashem, and we were clinging to God. V'lo nisu es hamakom baruch hu, and we never challenged God. Yesh lavar davar muflas. But we need to explain that. How's that possible? So he's setting it up as possible. You know why the Torah didn't record anything about those 37 or 38 years? Because nothing special happened. We did what we were supposed to do. That whole time in the Midbar, we were learning Torah from Moshe Rabbeinu. We did exactly what we were supposed to do. But how do you explain that? Why is it in year 1 and part of year 2 we got such problems? And in year 40 we got problems, but then that whole chunk in the middle, we were Boy Scouts, we were goody two-shoes. How do you explain that? So he says as follows, Vinira, here's how do I explain it. Hidor Deya, this was the generation of knowledge. Ochle Aman, this was such righteous people. They were so righteous, they were eating man. Sheyeshvu b'midbar, they sat in the wilderness, b'tzel ananei hakavod, in the shelter of those heavenly clouds. V'lamdu Torah mipi Moshe Rabbeinu. That's what they were doing. For 37 or 38 years, we were being sustained by God's man and by that beautiful water from the Be'er of Miriam. And we were in the cloud of glory, and we were learning Torah from Moshe. Vadai hochu ba'orech mishor b'darchei Hashem yisparach b'meshech zman zeh. For that stretch of 38 or 37 years, we were on the straight and narrow. We did exactly what we were supposed to do, so nothing eventful happened. You don't have a Parshas Korach taking place then because no one was rebelling. You don't have any incidents of anyone complaining because no one was complaining. We were doing exactly what we were supposed to do. We camped when we needed to camp. We ate the man that we needed to eat. We drank what we drank, and we learned Torah. Ulam. However, where did we have problems? B'tchilas darkam. When we first got started, b'shana rishona v'ashniya, in the first year and part of the second year, that's where we had tsaras. It was a transition stage. We were moving out of being a slave nation into now getting used to this new reality. That was where we made problems. We had left the 49th degree of unholiness. Hadiota tachtona is galus kavod Hashem yisparach b'ma'amar Sinai. We went from the lowest of the low to the highest of the high. It was so rapid until we stood at Sinai and we were able to witness God's glory. Me'avdus Paro, we went from being slaves to Paro, la'avdus Hashem yisparach, to being servants of God Almighty. V'shinuyim v'zazuim elu, having such a transition and such earth-shattering change in our lives. That caused us to have these challenges and to challenge God. We didn't have peace of mind. That was such a turbulent time. There was no easy, flowing waters. It was such a rapid change that we were in a tumult. And because of that tumult, that's why Klal Yisrael had those challenges, failed at those challenges, and really fought with Moshe and fought with God. Machmashinoi or choseim. Because our whole manner of life had changed on us. And we as human beings don't do too well when we got to deal with change. And then he goes, that also explains year number 40. In other words, we had real trouble at the beginning because that was getting used to a new reality. And now, as the plane, after takeoff, it's all steady, there's no turbulence. But the next hard part is at landing. So that's what he's going to say. Now at the other end of the spectrum, the last year that they're wandering in the wilderness, which is where you find the Chukas takes us to now. And that's where everyone's complaining about the water and the Memariva. That's where we find ourselves now. That's at the landing. Those are the two hardest times, the takeoff and the landing. When the Jewish people gets close to the gates of Israel, they're all prepared to walk into Israel. There was a great danger. There was a great hidden danger because we were drastically shifting gears. We were going from a miraculous existence, that's a matzava nisi, a miraculous existence, la matzava TV, to now a natural existence. We're going to have to become farmers. We're going to have to work for a living. We're no longer going to eat man and have the Be'er Miriam. We're not going to have the luxury of being sheltered by God's clouds. This is a very natural thing. There's a radical change in circumstances. This is like falling from heaven to earth. Like what in Parshas Bereshis, we read about these Nephilim. There were like these fallen angels that we're told came down from heaven to earth They fell into all the challenges of mankind, however that's supposed to be understood, and they caused a lot of problems. They ended up destroying the world. They caused a lot of problems, and that's in the beginning of Bereshis. Rashi talks about that in Targum Yonasan. Let's continue on the next page after the parentheses. So in Parshas Bereshis, the Nephilim, these are these angels, which we don't fully understand the concept. It's like this concept of fallen angels, that they were brought down from heaven to earth, and they never had a chance to adjust and learn how are we supposed to conduct ourselves in a land of humans, in a land of a different reality. They went down in levels. They destroyed themselves and they destroyed the world. So he wants to say, therefore, bishanim elu. Therefore, these years, these transitionary years for Bnei Yisrael, year number 1 and 2, and year 40, that these were such incredible years of transition and turbulence from going from one extreme to another. That's where Bnei Yisrael found themselves to be particularly challenged, and that's where we failed so many times. But those 37, 38 years in the middle, that was smooth sailing. That was beautiful. All the other years, they were set, they were stable, there was stability. They were not being shaken around. There was no shakeup. There was no challenges. There was no failures. What an incredible idea. I'm telling you, I had always wondered about this. Every year when Chukas would come by and I'd go over the Parsha, go over Rashi, and I'd see this, a flag would go off in my mind saying, that's amazing. We just fast forwarded 37 years, 38 years, and we know nothing about that period in the middle. I always just said, wow, that's astonishing. It's a piece of trivia, but I never gave it deeper thought. Rav Simcha Zissel has given it that deeper thought that it deserves, and he's got such a beautiful approach that I think we can all relate to. If we all look in our personal lives, the most challenging moments in our lives are when we're adjusting from one situation to another. Let's see his last paragraph. So here Rav Simcha Zissel was teaching his students. From this, we can learn a great lesson. We have to conduct ourselves with extra care. Whenever we change our circumstances, even if we're going up, it's one thing to say, okay, wow, there's real danger at the time of landing. You're coming from heaven down to earth. Oh, that could be a big shakeup. But even at the other extreme, when you're starting your aliyah, when you're going up in levels, in madregos, there's a great challenge there too, because we're shaken from our sense of security and we're getting used to a new set of circumstances. That's one of the greatest challenges a person can ever find themselves in. That's just the way we're hardwired as human beings. We have to be extra careful and be on guard that we don't come to incredible challenges. A person, if they find themselves losing, yishuv hadas means having peace of mind. A person loses yishuv hadas, they lose peace of mind depending on if their circumstances change. So we have to be on guard. Whenever we find ourselves in a changed set of circumstances, that's where we are really are prepped to mess up. And we have to be extremely vigilant at that. When we find ourselves at those stages in lives, when our circumstances have changed, we've got to be extremely vigilant because it's so easy to mess up at that point. Now look what he says. He brings a beautiful proof from a Gemara. And I had to look this up. This is a beautiful proof. Let's look at this in the parentheses, in the brackets rather. If you look at the Gemara in Megillah deals with Megillah Esther. It says, Amrulo Chachmei Yisrael Achashverosh. So let me back up and put this in context. This is, the way the sages understood after after Achashverosh has his party, his drunken feast at the beginning of the Megillah, and he calls for Vashti to come parade her before all of his henchmen, and she doesn't want to come. She doesn't want to come out there and show off her good looks. So now the king is in distress. He wants to know, how do I deal with this situation? So it says he turned to his chachamim. So who are the chachamim? So the sages say the first group of people he approached were actually Bnei Yisrael. He actually approached the chachamim. He approached the wise Jews and asked them, how do I deal with this? I want to read you the Gemara. So just pause here from Rav Simcha Zissel. Let me put this in context. Let me read you the Gemara. So this isn't on your sheet. I'm reading it to you. It says, Man chachamim. Who are the chachamim that Achashverosh turned to seek guidance? So it says, Rabbanan, they were the rabbis, Shiyodin Laber Shanim, these wise rabbis who know how to make the mathematical calculations when it's time to add an extra month into this, to make a leap year, L'kvah Chadashim, Amrlu Dinayu. So Achashverosh says, you guys are very smart. You've got your act together. And help me judge her. Help me judge Vashti. So the sages said amongst themselves, Heichi Na'aved, what should we do? We're in a catch-22. Nemale Katla, if we would say to Achashverosh, you should put her to death, L'machar Pasuk Le tomorrow when he sobers up, when his wine is out of his system, Uboy Lamina, and he's going to demand of us, asking, what did we do? Why did we advise him to kill her? And he killed her when he was drunk. So we'll be in trouble. So then, Nemale Shavka, so what do we do? Should we say instead, just leave her alone and pardon her? But then he'll accuse us of, how could you say I could pardon her? She belittled the crown and she messed with the crown. So they found themselves in a real catch-22. If we say to punish her, when he sobers up, he'll be mad. If we say let her go, then he'll also be mad, saying that she demeaned the crown. So how did the sages get out of this? Amrulo, the sages said to him as follows: from the day that the temple was destroyed, when we were exiled from our land, nitla etza mimenu, wise counsel has been taken away from us. We're just not able to think clearly anymore. That's how they said to him. And then he said, you know what, go to Ammon and Moab. Those nations, they never tasted exile. They're still in their original homeland, and they've got peace of mind. They could be your chacham, they could answer for you. That's how the Gemara says it. So let's look back at Simcha Zissel in the brackets. He goes, V'ayin beGemara and Megillah. Look at the Gemara in Megillah. It says, Amrulo, the Chachmei Yisrael said to Achashverosh, V'yom shecharav Beis HaMikdash, from the day that Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, v'galinu me'artzeinu, we were exiled from our land, nitla eitza mimenu. We no longer are capable of giving good advice. We just don't have peace of mind. V'amru al zeh beGemara, and the Gemara follows up saying that was very smart what they did. It says, V'taima amrule. They gave him a very logical answer. And Rashi says there, he goes, Rashi Sham, Yafa amrulo. Chazal, when they answered Achashverosh, they said very good. Devadei kenu, that's the way it works. Shemitoch she'adam shaket daitom yushavas love. When a person is at ease, that's when they've got clarity of mind. But when things are shaken up, when we're in galus, where we're not where we're supposed to be, we don't have peace of mind anymore. There's transition in our lives. We don't have peace of mind. So Simcha Zissel saying, this Gemara is exactly what I'm talking about. He says, this fits so beautifully with my theory, is that, again, the only times that we found that Klal Yisrael challenged God was in year 1, part of 2, and in part of year 40. Why? Because those were the massive transition stages in the national life of Klal Yisrael. We were first getting used to this new existence, and at the end we have to get used to a different existence. And both of those stages, a person loses Yishuv Hadas. They don't have clarity of mind, and the way they may have handled the situation with a sense of calmness and serenity and clarity beforehand, they're just not able to do now. That's the way that he dealt with this. So I thought that's a beautiful, absolutely beautiful approach. And I just looked something up, and I found something that was startling. I found something on a government website, and this was from a website that's, it's meant for parents and for educators. At what stage in developing adolescence, at what stage in their life are they most prone for drug abuse? And you'll see this fits with this. Look at this article. It says, preventing drug use amongst children and adolescents in brief. What are the highest risk periods for drug abuse among youth? Research has shown that the key risk periods for drug abuse are during major transitions in children's lives. The first big transition for children is when they leave the security of the family and enter a school. Later, when they advance from elementary school to middle school, they often experience new academic and social situations, such as learning to get along with a wider group of peers. It's at this stage, early adolescence, that children are likely to encounter drugs for the first time. When they enter high school, adolescents face additional social, emotional, educational challenges. At the same time, they may be exposed to greater availability of drugs, drug users, and social activities involving drugs. These challenges can increase the risk that they will abuse alcohol, tobacco, and other substances. When young adults leave home for college or work and are on their own for the first time, their risk for drug and alcohol abuse is very high. Consequently, young adult interventions are needed as well. And then I did emphasize this was like at the end, the summary. It said, because risk appear at every life transition, prevention planners need to choose programs that strengthen protective factors at each stage of development. And that's exactly what Rav Simcha Zissel was saying. He wasn't talking about drug use, but it's the same exact idea. We are most vulnerable to mess up and not be the person we want to be when our circumstances change, when we're at a transition page, a point in our lives. We can say, how did I do that? That's not who I am. That was a colossal mistake. How did I do that? And the answer is, our Yetzer Hara, our evil inclination, got the best of us. He took advantage of the fact that we weren't in a situation of tranquility. When we're in a transition stage, that's when we're most prone and most vulnerable to mess up. So that's when we need to really be aware and we need to be on guard. I remember as a kid, I was a big fan of a cartoon, the G.I. Joe cartoon. And at the end of the cartoon, every day, they would give you some kind of fact about the world around you. And they would always end and they would say, because now you know, and knowing is half of the battle. And I think that's what Rav Simcha Zissel is saying. We've just pointed out a reality, a fact of human nature. And now that we know this is how we're hardwired, now that we know this is a vulnerability that we all have, now we can be prepared. Knowing is half of the battle. What we know, once we know what we're up against, now we know what to prepare for. We know when to be on guard. And I think each and every one of us could find examples in our lives where we've made a mistake, where we did not act with the amount of wisdom that we know we would have under different circumstances. And I'm willing to bet, by and large, those fall into these circumstances. Those were transitionary phases in our lives. Because at those transitionary phases, that's when we're so prone. When we don't have that peace of mind, when things are shaken up, that's when we're really prone to mess up. And I think that this was such a good point. So again, just to sum this all up, we saw these two psukim in Perek Chaf this week in Chukas that say Kol Ha'edah. Kol Ha'edah tells us that the entire generation had passed. So that tells us we fast forwarded. We are now in year number 40. We saw the Ramban ask the question, why do we need that piece of information twice? The Ramban, we didn't do it today, but he gives his own answer. Then we saw Sorotzkin. Sorotzkin gives a different answer, and his answer was that the Torah wanted to emphasize that, yes, Miriam is going to pass away now, and yes, Aaron is going to pass away now, but their death had nothing to do with Kol Ha'edah. Their death had nothing to do with the reason why that whole generation of adult males died. They shared no guilt in that sin of the spies. That was his angle. Then we saw in Simcha Zissel that he points out that, yes, we just fast forwarded 37, 38 years, and we don't know what happened during those years. And when we look at the Mishnayos, we look at the Gemara that tells us all the times that we challenged God, we find an amazing fact. Those all happen in year 1, part of 2, and part of year 40. What happened that whole time in the middle? And how's that possible that we messed up at those beginning and at the end and not in the middle? So his theory is, yes, that whole time in the middle was smooth sailing. We did exactly what we were supposed to do. We didn't kvetch, we didn't rebel, we learned Torah, we ate man, everything was fine. But why did we mess up at the beginning and the end? Those were transition stages. And transition stages are the most dangerous point in a human being's life when we're most prone to make an error in judgment and to make a mistake. And that's exactly what happened, because we didn't have Yishuv Adas. And we didn't have peace of mind, tranquility of mind, and that's what happened. That's such a beautiful idea. And why doesn't the Torah record 37, 38 years? Nothing eventful happened that time. We did what we were supposed to do. We camped when we camped, we packed up, we left, we walked when we were supposed to walk. We listened to Moshe, listened to Aaron, listened to Miriam, ate man, and we learned Torah. What's there to talk about? We did what we were supposed to do. That's why that information's not there. But that's why that was left out. And then just to see how this comes down, what Rav Simcha Zissel was picking up on here, this is something that social scientists recognize as well, that the most dangerous points in adolescence life, in a person's life, are those transition points. And I remember, you saw in this last article, it says that one of the real risk periods for kids is, school, when they're starting a new school. You speak to anybody who relocated as a child. My whole childhood was stable. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and all of my years in elementary school were spent in the same school. I didn't feel that transition really, I guess, till I left for high school. But you speak to people who relocated as children, and they'll tell you as a young kid, some of them will say, what stress they felt starting a new school in the middle of elementary school and whatnot, those are transitions, and those can be very, very dangerous points in someone's life where they can make some terrible mistakes. And again, I think knowing is half the battle. When we're aware of this, we know how to be careful for ourselves, but we also know how to watch out for our friends, our family members, and people around us, how to give them the chizuk, the encouragement, the support, and the strength that they need when they find themselves at transition points, because we don't want anybody to make a mistake. We don't want anybody to fall. We don't want anyone to do anything that they might eventually regret. I'm going to stop the recording.